Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Social Media and Public Engagement Best Practices for Local Governments. My name is Melissa Keene, and I'm a Senior Program Manager with the Institute for Local Government and will be your moderator this morning. We have a high-level agenda of what we're going to cover today. So we're just going to do a quick welcome. We're going to turn it over to our friends at Takeovers to talk about social media trends and some high-level best practices. And then we've got speakers from the city of Paramount and Placer County who are going to share information about their explicit social media strategies and some of the lessons they've learned. We'll then transition into a panel discussion with all of our panelists to dig a little bit deeper into some of these best practices and some of these lessons learned that you're going to hear overviews about. And then we will go into an audience Q&A and wrap up and share some additional resources with you all and then adjourn by 11:30. You've probably noticed that your line is muted, and you will remain muted for the duration of this morning's webinar, but that doesn't mean you can't ask us questions. So you should see a questions box in your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can type questions into us at any point in time during the webinar, and as I just mentioned, we will get to as many of those as we can during the Q&A portion of this morning's webinar towards the end of the call. You can also type in any additional questions there, either questions for our panelists or any questions that you might have technology-wise or about the slides or anything like that. So feel free to type questions into us at any point in time. We are also recording this webinar, and we will be sharing the recording as well as the slide deck with all of you over the next few days. So just a little bit of information about ILG in case you aren't familiar with us. We are an affiliate of the League of California Cities, the California State Association of Counties, and the California Special Districts Association. So we work statewide to provide practical and easy-to-use resources so that you all as local agencies can more effectively implement policies on the ground. We do this in a number of ways. We do a lot of education and training, such as this webinar that you're on, but we also do conference sessions, longer format trainings, going back to in-person trainings, things like that. We also provide technical assistance and capacity building and convening services for local governments statewide. We have 4 main focus areas. The first is leadership and governance. So that's really how you can be more effective as a local government team, clarity around roles and responsibilities, working with councils and boards. And we also provide the ethics trainings that you as local governments are required to take. We have a program focused on civics education and workforce. So helping create that pipeline to public service, help facilitate municipal school partnerships, right now helping local governments navigate some of the recruitment and retention challenges that we know you all are facing, and things of that nature. We also have a program focused on public engagement, which is where today's webinar fits in, as you heard already. I'm thinking about the intersection of social media and public engagement and how to do that well. But in addition to this webinar, we have a framework that helps embed public engagement into local government operations. We help people navigate even things like getting started or dealing with difficult meeting participants, using technology and virtual engagement and hybrid engagement as we continue to navigate the remnants of the COVID pandemic. And then lastly, we also have a program focused on sustainable and resilient communities. So right now we're doing a lot of work around housing and land use, but also resilient communities and helping local governments navigate climate action planning, greenhouse gas reductions, energy savings, things of that nature. So if you're not familiar with us, definitely check out our website. We have a lot of free resources and trainings just to help you all essentially do your jobs hopefully a little bit easier. I want to quickly introduce our presenters for this morning's webinar. We are joined today by John Baroloni, who's a principal at our partner Takeovers, Andrew Villadano, who's the Assistant City Manager in the City of Paramount, and Wendy Williams, who's the Director of Communications and Public Affairs in Placer County. Before we get started, just wanted to do a few instant polling questions. These first couple are targeted at getting to know who's in the room. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our first question here. So we're hoping you can share what type of agency you are with. So are you with a city, a county, a special district, or maybe other? Maybe you're with a nonprofit or a consulting firm. Give this just another couple seconds. Okay. Almost everybody, so I'm going to go ahead and close this and then share this back out. So almost 60% of the folks on the line are with a city. We've got a little over 20% with a county, 7% with special districts, and then a little over 10% in that other category. Next up, we're hoping you can share where in the state you are joining us from. So are you in Northern California, the Central Valley, Inland Empire, Southern California, or the Central Coast? We know these are very big regions, but we had limited options on the full responses. Yeah, 85% of you responding. Just another couple seconds here. I'm going to go ahead and close this and share that back out. So about 40% of you are joining us from Northern California, almost 30% from Southern California, but another 20% in the Central Valley, and then you see the Inland Empire and Central Coast there as well. Thank you. Really appreciate you sharing that. We just have a couple more questions for you. These are more related to your social media presence. So as we dig into some of these high-level best practices, we were just hoping to get a little bit more information about your social media practices. So the first one we're going to launch here is, how many total social media sites does your agency have? So we know sometimes each department has one, sometimes it's a little bit more centralized. So we're just curious how many different sites you guys have. At about 90%, so I'm going to go ahead and close this and share. So a little over half of you have 0 to 4 social media sites. Almost 25% have 5 to 9. You see a handful of folks there that have 10 or more social media sites, and then some of you are not sure. Perfect. Okay, so which of those sites do you believe is most important to your agency's communications goals? We are going to make you pick just one for right now, but we will be talking about most of these platforms as we go throughout today. .75% of people have responded, so I'll give this just another couple of seconds for you guys to choose. Close this out and share. So the majority of you all identified Facebook as the platform that most furthers your agency's communications goals. Behind that, you see Instagram, and then Twitter, and then a few folks with Nextdoor, and then just a couple with TikTok. And then speaking of TikTok, we are curious if your agency has a TikTok account. We know that's one of the newer platforms, and local governments are not always jumping on the newest social media platforms. So just curious how many of you all have experimented with this so far. Okay. Share these results. So about 8% of you do already have a TikTok. 75 do not. There's a handful of you that are in the process of setting one up, and another chunk that about 10% that are not sure. Okay. And then we get to one more question for you all. Thank you for bearing with us here. This is another thing that we're going to be chatting about this morning. So we're just curious when the last time your agency boosted a post on Facebook or Instagram. Which, in case you're not familiar with that terminology, that means a paid post. So you're paying for more folks to have eyes on your post through Facebook or Instagram. It's just another second or two. Okay. Share these results with you all. So about a quarter of you seem like you probably boost fairly regularly. You've done so in the past month. About another 15% in the last 6 months to a year. A handful of you have done so, but maybe not recently. 20% have never boosted a post, and then about a third of the folks on the line are not sure. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for bearing with us through that. I know that was quite a few questions, but it really helps us set the stage in terms of who we're talking to and the level of experience or your agency's approach to social media. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to John to kick us off and talk through some of those trends and best practices. John?
Thanks, Melissa. And it's a rare thing where we get to do a poll of, approximately 175 local government communication professionals and see what they're thinking. So personally, I know that's really valuable for me to see those answers. So thank you all again for taking the time. Next slide, Melissa. I'm going to start by laying out a few scenarios of how public agencies are using social media, and you can figure out where you land on that spectrum as well as how you feel about where you currently are. Next slide. On the least advanced end of the social media usage spectrum, we have what I call the digital bulletin board. So let's be honest, how many of our Facebook page and our Instagram account grids look like this nowadays? We've got a bunch of digital flyers about news or events where you're not expecting any real engagement. You just want to be able to look your leadership or elected officials in the face and say, yeah, we got the word out. Or you're taking it to an extreme, you're actually disabling comments on your posts whenever possible, so your community is forced to engage with you elsewhere. Next slide. The next level up would be monitoring your posts for opportunities to provide customer service, whether that's thanking somebody for their positivity or answering a legitimate question or correcting misinformation, which I know we'll dive into later in this webinar, or funneling a commenter to an email or phone number or someone else who can give them more personalized help. Next slide. The next level after that is leveraging the features of social media platforms to truly engage in dialogue with your community, such as the sometimes scary mixed bag that is Facebook Live. And it takes a lot of effort to get to this phase and execute it well. You need buy-in from your leadership. You need a strategy of when you're going to make this extra effort. You need good equipment to produce high resolution and quality content. You need tech-savvy employees or contractors to help you run the logistics of these more advanced features and troubleshoot when something inevitably goes wrong. You need thick skin to absorb any criticism you receive in real time and know how to appropriately respond. And lastly, you need to be able to look back at your metrics and figure out how to improve for the next time that you do want to make this extra effort. Next slide. So I would say the highest level of social media usage is actually being on the cutting edge of social media adoption, not just trailing the private sector by 2 to 3 years, which we tend to do in this local government space. So despite media headlines about the US government considering banning TikTok, it's stuck around and it's grown. And if engaging people between the ages of 16 to 34 is important to you, this is probably your next frontier to go explore. As much as it pains me to say that, and as much as it kind of is cringe sometimes in the local government space, this is your next space to go look at. For a California specific example, we recommend you go check out the city of Santa Clarita's TikTok because they've been around for a while and they've been experimenting for a while. Their handle is at City of Santa Clarita. You can go kind of check out the content that they're creating and maybe it'll give you some ideas for kickstarting it on your own. Next slide. The data you see here is from the Pew Research Center, and it's based on an April 2021 survey, so you can bet that this data has shifted a bit already. Note, this is for US adults, so the data is going to look a little bit different for those who are under 18 years old. The top three, no surprises, practically everybody uses YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. They've been the top three for years now. But just to point out the fickle nature of social media, 5 years ago, we probably all thought Snapchat was going to be the Facebook killer. Now, TikTok, even though it's relatively new, has caught up to Snapchat in terms of the number of users. And I'm calling out Nextdoor here with that little green arrow because despite its position in this chart, Trippi Smith feels is the second most important social network for public agencies to be on right now. I'm sure we can get into it in the discussion and Q&A section later, but just know that individual property owners are a pretty powerful group and you want to be able to engage with them. Next slide. Content times distribution equals impact. This is a formula that Trippi Smith came up with to illustrate the point. What good is content if you aren't properly promoting, distributing, and sharing it? On the other end, what good is distribution if the content fails to engage your audience positively? So something we try to impress upon our clients that we work with in the local government space, distribution has to be planned in advance, especially for budgeting purposes. So ask yourself, just like we did in that poll question earlier, when you're creating quality content, are you boosting posts on Facebook and Instagram? Are you creating promoted tweets? Are you turning videos into bumper ads on YouTube, etc.? Next slide. One of the reasons it's so important to embrace social media advertising is because we know the algorithms are not in our favor. You can see here a chart from the past 12 months tracking the average organic Facebook page post reach and engagement rates. We've done the math for you at the bottom of the slide here just to show how little reach and engagement to expect on average per 10,000 followers. So thinking back to content times distribution equals impact, you need to make some extra effort to enhance that distribution variable, because despite how much effort you put into creating great content, it might not get very far on its own. Next slide. And you can see here that the same goes for Instagram. Although the average reach and engagement are a bit higher, about 4 times as much reach on average and about twice as much engagement on average. So as you're looking at this data and digesting it, this might even impact which social networks you're focusing on as part of your social media strategy. Next slide. You probably already know that you can run advertisements on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, but Nextdoor ads are brand new as of 1 week ago. That was previously an option only for local businesses and brands. So we will make sure that as part of our handout after this webinar, you get a link to some more information, but just know in advance the self-service ad route is going to be the way to go here, unless you want to spend a minimum of $15,000 per month to get some extra features and some hands-on help from Nextdoor. Next slide. I know Andrew and Wendy are going to cover this as well, but your social media strategy needs to evolve to include more video content. Per Meta, Instagram users are spending 20% of their time on the platform watching Reels, and Facebook users spend 50% of their time watching video content. And we also know those charts on the right there, Facebook Live videos will on average get you the most interactions on your Facebook content. And as of Q2 of 2022, Reels and carousels will get you the most Instagram interactions. Next slide. We as local government communicators only have a fraction of a second to capture someone's attention as they're scrolling through their social media feeds on their phone. So you have to think, what can you immediately show them at the start of your video to stop them from scrolling by? That should be part of your strategy every single time you're coming up with video content. And are there video formats that you can take advantage of that make a topic more interesting for your audience? Maybe a time lapse of a construction project versus just a before and after, or slow-mo from a youth sports league, or a panorama from a hiking trail vantage point. Try and get creative and think outside the box. Think, what would be interesting to my audience? Next slide. And know that today's smartphones are pretty darn good cameras, but if you have professional equipment at your disposal, that will almost always be your best option. So a tip that we've seen cities doing lately is collaborating with their police departments, if they have one, to borrow their drone and their drone operator for a day or two and go shoot B-roll out in the city that they can then use later on in the year. So if you have that at your disposal, take advantage. Last slide. So last but not least, I am just going to surface this topic of digital governance. You can see we've got a link here where you can learn a little bit more. But digital governance is a framework for establishing accountability, roles, and decision-making authority when it comes to your social media. Without that framework, social media management, more often than not, becomes the wild, wild west, where you don't have the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing, even within the same agency. The three parts of a digital governance framework are strategy, policies, and standards, and you need to establish them in that order. This whole topic could be a separate webinar in itself. So again, we're just going to leave you with this link that includes a short quiz that you can take to assess your own digital governance status. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Melissa.
Great, thank you so much, John. I really appreciate that overview. And we will come back. We've got a few questions for you, but I want to make sure we get through the other presenters, and then we will get into that questions and discussion piece. But just as a reminder to everybody on the line, feel free to drop any questions you have throughout the presentation into that questions box in your control panel. So with that, I'm going to then turn it over to Andrew to talk about the City of Paramount's social media strategy and distribution.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, so I really appreciate ILG asking us to come out and talk about our experience and some of the strategies that we've employed over the last couple of years with our social media. We're, as you'll see in the first couple of slides, we're a really tight-knit community. We know our audience. We like to think that we're really engaged, and we built a lot of trust with our community members. So I'll go and talk a little bit about first kind of a profile of our city, so I can share where we're coming from and how our profile is. And then I'll talk a little bit about our strategies and some of the lessons that we've learned over the last couple of years. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about Paramount. We're about 4.6 square miles. We're situated in southeast LA County. We're bordered by 4 different freeways. I mean, we're right in the center of a huge metropolis here. We're adjacent, located right along the 710 freeway. So we have a heavy transportation corridor, from the Long Beach and LA ports all the way up to the city of Los Angeles and throughout the region. We're predominantly a Hispanic Latino community with over about 80% in that population demographic. We have about 53,000 residents. Next slide, please. Just some of the things that we take a lot of pride in. We're one of the first cities with an all-female city council in California. As far as the profile of our organization, we do operate 6 departments. We have about 90 full-time city employees. Generally, depending on the season, we have between 175 to 200 part-time employees. As far as our team of communications and community engagement, we do have 1 full-time public information officer and 2 part-time communication specialists that help in the social media and digital content creation space. As the assistant city manager, I oversee that small division, so we work very closely as a tight-knit group to kind of monitor our overall organization as it pertains to our communication strategies. Some of the general issues that we face community and what we see pretty commonly, cyclically throughout the year. As I mentioned, we're right in dead center of a major transportation hub, both not just freeway traffic, but port shipping traffic as part of the gateway region. So we do deal with a lot of regional air quality issues. That's a major concern for us and our city council and our community. Homelessness, like a lot of cities in California, is a major issue that we do lean into, and those are the issues that we do try to be very engaging about. If you're not from the LA area, I'm not sure if other cities outside or other counties or areas outside of Southern California deal with this, but street takeovers and street racing is a big issue right now, not just administratively, but it's a big issue among a lot of elected leaders as a major nuisance, and it just creates a lot of havoc. And cities, we are spending a lot of money on that. And as you'll kind of see in the presentation, those are some major issues along our social media that we try to engage with our public about. And then generally economic development, both in our region and our city. Next slide. So as I go through the next few slides, I just kind of want to share up front, as the leadership of our organization, both our city council, myself, our city manager, and our department heads, we've all been very open, and we do try to implement a strategy or an environment where we can all talk very openly about how we pursue our engagement and how we engage with our community. And these are generally some topics and issues that we've spoken about just in recent months as leadership on how we want to move through this space. We want to be more proactive in engaging and monitoring, and you'll hear me talk about this as a lesson learned as well. But for a lot of cities, it's really important, and having worked in local government for almost 20 years, I see how we've really utilized social media in a positive way as a bulletin board, as John mentioned. We create content, we post flyers, we let the community in on what we're doing as events. But something that is really starting to expand in the area we want to expand in is engaging and monitoring, trying to keep a pulse on what the real issues are out there in the community. And I'll talk about some of the strategies that we're doing to succeed in that area. As John mentioned, we are seeing that a lot of our posts, our Facebook Live and videos are getting the most attention, and we see that that's something that we really want to expand on and lean into. We know that we have certain strengths in our community, and as an administration, we know we have a pretty good idea of how to tap into that. So that's something we want to focus on as our strategies. Keep it simple. We have, for the decade that we've had Facebook, we've only had one city dedicated page. Only 2 weeks ago did we finally introduce a second page, and that's a strength that we feel. We have a lot of traffic on that one page. Despite the fact that we have a dozen different issues and 6 different departments, we knew that creating a bunch of different pages wasn't going to be successful, and we weren't going to be able to draw as much engagement as it would just be focusing on our strengths. Prioritizing and responding to misinformation, that's something very dear to us, and making sure that we get accurate information that the community trusts what we're putting out, because we know that the community does rely on City Hall as a main source of information. And something new for us is we really want to explore engaging with influencers to augment our boosting and to try to make sure that we can get to the largest audience and draw people and continue that content creation. Next slide, please. So these next few slides, I'm going to just kind of introduce a little bit about what our pages look like and some of the engagement. So just in the last 28 days, we've reached 20,500 people. We've engaged with just a little over 9,700. This is just on our Facebook. Here you'll see an example on the post on the left. This was a post that garnered a lot of attention. It's one of our a post that would probably receive the most attention and engagement with in probably the last 6 months. In this particular incident, we had Southern California Edison send a bunch of letters out to a local neighborhood saying that they were going to shut the power off as part of a planned outage. It just so happened to be that particular weekend was 110 degrees here. So needless to say, that was of a big concern. When we tried to contact SCE, they didn't know who they had sent the letters out to at that point anymore. So we decided to proactively jump on our social media, let everyone know that we're opening up a cooling center. And knowing that we had a lot of seniors in the community, a lot of people lower income people that don't have air conditioning, we knew that this was something that this critical resource, this service, was very dire information that we wanted to get out. And needless to say, it reached a whole lot of people. I'll talk about this a little later on the post on the right. This is our first post for our new Facebook page that we just launched, dedicated to public safety. But I'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide. As far as our Instagram posts, these are our top performing posts in the last 2 years. You can see we have 11,000 followers on our Instagram. in the last 30 days, we reached just over 19,000, engaged with about 2,700. And Melissa, I'm not sure if you could play that video on number 3, but I think
let me try.
Yeah, sorry about that. And the only reason why I wanted to show this video is for all of those, just a little introduction to Paramount. In case you didn't know, Paramount is home to the world famous Zamboni machine. It actually, we're the corporate headquarters. So Zamboni, the family and the company still are housed here in Paramount. And so back in 1949, they built not only the corporate headquarters here, but they also built Iceland, which is a local ice rink here. They just recently sold the ice rink to the LA Kings. And what you see in that video here was the original Model A Zamboni getting moved from the headquarters to the new LA Kings Iceland for its permanent home. And we knew it was going to draw a lot of attention. We knew that our community, they embraced the Zambonis. They were very proud that this machine, which is a worldwide recognized machine, as was made and is housed in Paramount. So we made sure to put a lot of attention on it. Facebook lived it, did a lot of video behind it, and sure enough, it received a whole lot of attention. So. And I think the lesson here is that, we really have a good idea of what our community wants to see, what their interests are. So when we can go above and beyond to document it and market it, I think it's all part of really knowing our brand. So next slide, please. Here's just some creative content, and just all this is to show is that we do also contract with a contractor to do our graphics design. So we do graphics design in-house, but we also send it external. That's just to augment the workload. And we do find that whenever you have really, I don't want to say colorful, but really well done graphics, a lot of your recreation departments and some of your other departments, are really good in this creative space. We really make sure to try to, make those front and center. And these are the ones that obviously have the most likes and engagement. Next slide, please. So here's another example of some of the creative content on the left. Melissa is a video as well. Sorry, and this is just so happens to be a video that our recreation department made in collaboration with our small communications division. So what I want to really demonstrate here is that social media, we've realized, transcends all departments. We really want to try to share the resources and tap into the talent that exists. Being that strength is in numbers. Our recreation department is huge. It has a lot of younger staff who are very, very talented. And although they don't work in our communications department or division, we're not afraid to reach out and empower them and give them the freedom to create that really good content that they know how to do. And obviously all this stuff is vetted by our communications team, but I think the lesson here is that videos will always get more attention, and tap into talent where possible. We're a pretty small organization, and we know that by tapping into the creative resources out there across all departments, is going to bring out the best in terms of creative content. Next slide, please. So this is a new area for us, which I've kind of loosely titled it as active engagement. I mentioned early on that, for a lot of us, we're always so used to creating content, putting out flyers, and leaving it as kind of a one direction type of engagement. But our leadership this year, our city council, what we're finding is that they're getting tagged, our city council members are getting tagged directly by community members on Facebook community groups. And, so what that ends up being is that, all the city staff are getting peppered with screenshots from different council members on all sorts of different issues. And so one thing that we want to lean into this particular year and moving forward is actually proactively engaging the community. So what we've done is we've hired a private firm to help us 7 days a week, twice a day, monitor not only just our social media, but we have a very active community where we have for example, we have 4 different community groups on Facebook that we've built relationships with. And so now the city, these are private community groups that the city has managed to partner with. And so now we're part of those community groups. And this private firm that we use, they go on twice a day and monitor for everything that's going on in the community. And in this particular example, they found on one of the larger community groups, there was a parent whose special needs child, she was dropping him off at school, and the sidewalk just out of the school was really in disrepair. So we caught it. We're able to engage with the community group members in that Facebook community page. The message was, hey, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We're going to get working on it, and by over the weekend we had the sidewalk completely repaired. Needless to say, that garnered a lot of positive attention. The lesson here, being that we want to, social media enables community conversations. We don't expect them to always occur on our turf, on our pages. We know that naturally happens in other community groups, and so we know that the information is going to move faster than we can, and so we wanted to lean into it and try to be out there, seeing what's going on, and hopefully that builds trust and that builds our brand as responsive and proactive. I will say the caveat is, for everyone who might be a little bit concerned about the time that takes, is part of this was setting expectations with not only leadership but with city council, letting them know that, look, we're not going to be able to beat everyone to the punch, and that's not the expectation. But if we can try to get out there once a day and keep a pulse on that community, we'll do, it's a team effort. We'll all be better for it. Last page. So I mentioned our public safety page. This is something, the only reason why I'm highlighting it here is we just launched it last week. Since then, these are the statistics that we have for it, and it's continuing to grow. And the only reason why I bring this up is because while monitoring and engaging through those private community Facebook pages, we noticed that about 90% of the chatter out there was related to public safety issues. Street racing, graffiti, suspicious people walking in their neighborhoods, and with that came a lot of misinformation. And so we thought this is an opportunity to, instead of chase the information, create a space where we can encourage the community to engage, and we can give up-to-date information, provide a space where we can provide accurate information, build that trust, and just continue to offer kind of what the community is demanding. But the lesson here is, we don't want to create a page just to create a page, just because it's a certain topic of the month. That's not something that we're dying to do. We'd like to think that we're being strategic about it, and in this particular case, it was something that was heavily trafficked. So yeah. So next page, and I think this is my final slide, just kind of recapping our lessons learned, is social media has changed the landscape of what we consider as traditional public information strategies. That's kind of obvious, but the fundamentals are still the same. We really want to be accurate. We want to provide consistent information. We want to be brief, and we want it to be clear. The proactive engagement and monitoring, that is a new space for us, but we do think that information is moving faster than we can handle, and if we can set expectations to lean into those ongoing conversations happening in the community, then it's our responsibility to do that. We want to approach social media as creating trust and building trust and maintaining trust in our brand. We're doing that through engagement, responding to misinformation, and avoid content overload. And as I mentioned, social media transcends all departments. We really do aim to share all the resources and tap into all the talent that we possibly can. And as I wrap up, just in the end, we don't forget, and we don't. It's not beyond us to remember that, yes, we still are a governmental institution. We still are the face of our community in terms of making sure that we give out correct and accurate information. So we want to do that as responsibly as possible, and while also testing the limits of creativity. So that's all I have for today, and thank you for allowing me to share about Paramount.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate your perspective here, and you're sharing your lessons learned from Paramount. Just another reminder to all of the folks on the line, feel free to add questions into the questions box you see in your control panel. We've seen a number come through and we're tracking all of that so we can get to as many as possible during our discussion and Q&A. So feel free to continue to do that. Oh, and here's Paramount's handles in case you want to follow them or check out any of their social media platforms. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wendy to talk about Placer County. Wendy? Wendy, you might be muted if you're trying to talk.
How is that?
There we go. Now we can hear you.
Did I make you nervous? Sorry about that. It always takes one, right? Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you about Placer County's social media engagement program. To let you know who we are, Placer County is located next to Sacramento County in Northern California and has approximate population of about 436,000. The west side is urban and has most of the population, while the eastern portion of the county is more wildland with small mountain communities. The county extends through the Sierra to North Lake Tahoe, something interesting about it. Next slide, please. Thank you. We have a team. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead to the next slide. Great. We have 8 team members in the Communications and Public Affairs Office. Our team includes 3 public information assistants, along with another 4 who work more independently for departments with elected officials, which includes like the DA's office, Sheriff's office, the registrar, recorder. We collaborate cross-departmentally with these folks, but they don't actually work directly in the team with me. We have a great in-house videographer, a website designer, an amazing intern, and I'm fortunate to be assisted by a phenomenal deputy director who is in the slide show that you see on the green screen. So we have a large team, but we never lack for work. I can tell you we're always very, very busy. Next slide, please. These are the channels that we use to share our messaging. You'll note that we use most of the typical ones. I did not include TikTok because we are just starting to dabble with it with recruitment. So maybe next time I'll add it to the list. We do use Nextdoor pretty extensively to reach specific neighborhoods. Perhaps not as typical for our county as our Placer Life podcast. If you can see one of the slideshows up there says "One pill can kill." That is our campaign to raise awareness of the national fentanyl crisis because it's really having an impact on our very own county. We did a 5-episode podcast about the death of an 18-year-old boy named Zach Didier, and it did receive national attention. A very sad story told by the parents. It's been amazing reach for social media, lots of engagement. I think most parents relate to the fear of losing a child. So this is something that I think is tremendous to be talking about this in the social media forum to really encourage parents to speak with their kids. So I think we're making a difference on that at a grassroots level, and that is actually having a national influence as well. And as I said, the influence has been, the engagement has been tremendous. Another new medium that you may not be familiar with is called Simplicity, and it's an app that scrubs our website for newly posted press releases and provides push notifications to subscribers. It's new and it's growing. It's another way to reach residents with our messaging. Our Instagram, I would add, features a lot of our photos of the week. And if you go and you look at our Instagram, it's beautiful. It really showcases the gorgeous county that we have. But we typically only rely on sharing information through stories and through reels. And sometimes I feel like this is a miss, but it's doing so well as almost like a tourism reach for the county that it's hard to change what we've already put in place because we have over 13,000 followers who love the pictures. As a county, we cover everything from animal services to elections, town halls, parks and trails, transportation, transit, housing, health and human services. It goes on and on. The thing that is interesting also is that we have Lake Tahoe. It's unique and that it is isolated and it's got a lot of tourism related challenges and opportunities. And so we really have an interesting county to cover. Next slide, please. Video communication. We have an in-house videographer who is awesome, and he has great equipment, including a high-end drone, which he regularly uses, and we even dabble in studio work. But I want to show you something here. This is our run and gun kit, and we use our smartphone with run and gun kits just like this, and I ask all of our team members to be able to do it. And so we take this, it's got audio, it's got wireless mics on it, it's got a way to connect up to a cage. We use a tripod, and I just can't encourage you enough to include this into your system. The whole thing probably costs like maybe $350 if you can fit that into your budget. It's how you produce quality video, so that it's not just pictures, but it's also audio, and I think it's also the way to provide excellent Facebook Live events. And so the hardest part for us with video is keeping it short. The shorter you go, the better, I would say. If it goes too long, people usually only watch the first few minutes anywhere, the first few seconds, really, unfortunately. I believe our Vimeo, which is where we put most of our links, even though we do have a YouTube channel, we rely on video. We rely on our links coming from our portal in Vimeo. We had 7,500 views this past September. Next slide, please. I think the reason we had 7,500 views is because we had the mosquito fire, which burned nearly 80,000 acres and was the largest fire in the county's history. It's been not really the last month. I'm just barely digging out of old work that was on standby while we worked through this crisis. The county is responsible for emergency communication, and I would say when there is an emergency, that's when we become essential to the community on social media. We follow the practice of sharing our partners' information, which means we don't try and duplicate their efforts. We don't want to get things wrong. We don't want to not be updating when it needs to. So we really make sure that we're sharing what CAL FIRE is doing, what Placer County Sheriff's Office is doing, and onward and so forth. The best thing I can say is that our residents have learned that the county can be relied on to provide up-to-date information during a crisis. Next slide, please. Our strategy during emergency is to use social media to link our audience to the Ready Placer dashboard on our website. It's kind of a new feature. We brought it on board last year. We didn't realize we were going to have so many more emergencies in the last year, so it was good timing on our part. But the dashboard has all the vital info a person would need during any type of an emergency. The info changes depending on the incident. So it's, whether it's a fire or a flood, snowstorm, or major power outage, we typically will change the tabs under the dashboard that have to do with that particular emergency. And then we'll communicate that through social media and also follow up with shelter information and road closures and evacuation maps. And so the most important piece of this is two-way communication, because we find out from our residents what their needs are by their replies back to us on our social media. And those are really key to finding out what holes you can assist with in terms of, do you need additional room for an animal storage? Do you need a place to put your RV? And those are the kinds of communications we get when we're in the middle of a crisis that come back to us in social media that are really relevant. Next slide, please. I wanted just to show you this engagement. I looked at 3 years so you could actually see what a normal September or August or what a normal December looks like. And you can see by this data on Facebook how vital crisis communication is to our residents. And in August of 2021, we had the river fire. It destroyed 100 homes, and you can see the reach increased, but it was only a 3-day fire, unlike the recent mosquito fire this past September, which lasted for 2 weeks and drove engagement to over 300,000. Compare that reach to our quiet September in 2021, which had less than 100,000. So you can really see how important it is for us to be providing information during a crisis, especially on social media. If you're look at September, and you'll notice that in September 20, compared to September 22, they look kind of familiar, right? September 2020 was COVID, and I believe that was the month the governor announced Placer County had to reclose its businesses. So that definitely was a cause for concern and caused our engagement to spike incredibly as the conversation erupted over that. And in December of 2021, we had a Christmas storm that impacted several thousand people. I would say we would probably have had more engagement during this particular crisis, but the power was out everywhere. And so I think there was no cell phone coverage, there was no power outage. We were trying our best to use social media, and I think we quickly learned that social media isn't for every crisis. And that was our big takeaway for that one, is to remember to have those posters and to remember to get out and be on foot and talk to people when there is no power. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 was much akin to a crisis for us. Only this one, the difference is that it lasted for a very long time. We were very unfortunate to have been the first COVID death in California, and that happened in March of 2020. Our team was really strong with COVID communications. We created our own website and duplicated the state's info on that site and made it a lot easier to digest for our local residents. We developed a Reopen Placer campaign that was a physical signage out on the streets, advertising everywhere, but we also had a strong social media campaign surrounding this. We pushed all kinds of info regarding social media about testing and vaccines and social distancing and mask wearing, and everything was going well until the day that the governor mandated we reclose our businesses. And then social media blew up in our faces because we were really in front of this. We really owned the communication. Next slide, please. The hard part was our Board of Supervisors did not support the governor's programs. They felt the solution was worse than the problem, and they were vocal during board meetings and did not want to reclose businesses. This caused residents who didn't like that stance to speak out on social media. The media started identifying Placer as a vocal opponent, and the national controversy suddenly was flourishing on Facebook and Twitter feeds in a rather vicious way. There were some ugly threats made. It was concerning. And so what we decided to do was stop owning the communication, since we could not control the direction in which it went. And I think that was probably a smart move. We of course continued to share all the information that was relevant, but we shared the state's information. We pushed people to the state website, and we basically decided not to be running in the front, but to be following the communication of the state. Next slide, please. I'll show you what that looks like. This is kind of an interesting slide. You'll note that if you look at the data, the blue is 2020, and you can see the impact of COVID communication. People were engaged. There was all kinds of discussion going on. And if you look at the Facebook changed their algorithm, I think it's important to note that around, let me look real quick, October, we believe Facebook changed their algorithm. They asked us to sign back in as a government entity. There were some changes that were made. Then all of a sudden, our reach dropped substantially. And that's when you started to see that Facebook was asking you to boost your posts. And we realized that they had changed the rules of the game, and we were not getting the reach that we were accustomed to. And so over the last year, really, we have started to pay and boost our posts. And you can see the green line in 2022. It has increased substantially. We continue to do the same work that we've been doing on social media, but having to pay for it has been a significant change, and one that we have incorporated into our budget so that we can continue to have the reach that we want. Next, please. Our social media has evolved. Probably the biggest change is that we don't automatically add all of our stories on Facebook and Twitter. It used to just be an automatic. Now we tend to keep the more complicated messaging in press release form and add it to our weekly newsletter. We might maybe highlight pieces of that press release, but we try to control the messaging so that it doesn't end up being distorted by those who might be commenting and not necessarily be informed. But when they do comment, we are there to respond and try and correct the record. We try, but sometimes it can get ugly, especially if it's in I think especially if it's in the COVID arena where there had been so much controversy. And in that regard, we did tend to just back away and not try and be part of that conversation because it was very difficult to control and people were extremely emotional. I think overall, though, the social media climate is changing again. I think it's becoming kinder again as people are coming back and back into groups and accepting the new post-COVID world. And I think that's really important, that we're more comfortable again bringing back out content that might generate some controversy. But for our team, we've been a little bit traumatized, and we're having to come back and say, okay, we're willing to go back into the water, and we trust that our viewers and our residents and audience will be kinder. And I think I'm seeing that evolution in our audience as well, that COVID was just really a bad time for us. We do have a lot of other things that we do. We hold groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings, press conferences. We share all of that via Facebook Live. We organize community outreach events. But the biggest thing for us is the virtual town hall meetings. We still have them. Our board still holds virtual meetings as well as in person, but I think we are holding virtual town halls on a weekly basis. We've had great civic engagement. I can't say enough about this form of communication. We're also looking forward to creating a new county news center, basically a new website where all of our news lives for a longer period of time in one location. So instead of just being a couple of stories on our homepage, it'll actually be like a newspaper's online information page. We're looking to have that come out at the end or probably in the middle of next year, but that's our way of owning more information and pushing people to a spot where we can control the messaging a little bit more and not have it distorted in the social environment as much. But that's just another outlet for us. Anyway, that's what I have to share for you today.
Great, thank you so much, Wendy. Would love to invite all of our panelists back on camera so we can jump into questions and discussion. Great. So would love to dig into kind of where Wendy was leaving off there. Obviously, the world has changed a lot in the last 2 years, not just on the technology side of social media, but on how residents are interacting with local governments, how just their day-to-day lives between COVID. Wendy also mentioned the increase in wildfires and natural disaster events. So just curious from all of your perspectives, how has engagement and social media evolved over the last few years? What are you seeing?
Well, from my perspective, I think that you're seeing there's that time where everyone was, in the house and they weren't able to leave, and the engagement within those community pages just really spiked up. It was becoming very difficult to track all of, the chatter and what's going on, the important issues going on out there. In addition to all of the things that were right in front of your face, all of the COVID issues, the COVID testing, working with the county and all the health departments and stuff. So what I think is changed, or the landscape is adjusting to, is being able to keep a good idea and pulse on what's going on in the community. And they're not everyone's going to want to engage on your own city page or county page, and trying to figure out what those particular items of importance are, those hot topics, and try to provide a space for people to engage in, if that's how you want to handle it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that we have to really be careful about not solely relying on social media for our engagement. I think it's important to get back out and be in front of people and to be participating in their events and not just shouting out on our pages or engaging on our pages. I just think that the face-to-face is helpful, and we're encouraging that a lot more. I think people want more public engagement, and I think that something happened in the middle of social media where things got a little dark, and the kindness kind of faded, and social media wasn't a pleasant place to be. And I think that perhaps it might be coming back. I sense that the temperature has come down, and people are becoming a little bit kinder with their words. That's just how I see it, and we're coming back into a social environment. And I think things got dark there for a while, and I think it's just really important that we connect on a in-person level, and that we connect out in the community, and we start to resume as much normalcy, so that we're not all on social, because that's kind of a different world.
Agreed, Wendy. And something I'll dovetail off of what you pointed out here. It's kind of like we're straddling two worlds now in terms of in-person and online. And our communities, I think, have gotten used to being able to be in both worlds with us. So public meetings, just as a clear example of that, for a long time, those had to go virtual only. Now we're getting back to a place where some council members or city leadership or board of supervisors leadership may want to go back to saying, okay, we're going to go back to just in person, and you got to be here in the room if you want to talk. But if your community has gotten used to being able to participate virtually, they still want that option. So we're seeing within our own client base, there's a big push to be able to both have in-person meetings while simultaneously streaming them online. And we know that takes a lot of time, energy, and resources to plan.
I think it's hugely effective, though. We found our community participates online more than they do in person. It's more convenient for people that are working in 9 to 5. They come home, they want to participate in government, and this is the way they can do it. And we're finding it's a great ad. If it's the one good thing that has come out of COVID, that is the one good thing, and we're moving it forward.
No, we're definitely hearing the same thing in terms of that hybrid approach and folks wanting to be able to continue to attend and participate in a virtual space. How are you all navigating that outside of your city council meetings or board of supervisors meetings in terms of going back to that in-person community engagement? Are you seeing social media as a value add there? Are you using it? Going back to the Facebook Live idea that we talked about earlier, how are you using social media in partnership with in-person engagement events at this point? Or are you?
For us, being a small city, I mentioned toward the end of my presentation that there's still the reality that we're a government institution. There are some things that we're just bound by in terms, especially when you're trying to transcend into council meetings and formal board meetings. There's Brown Act issues, there's rules of decorum issues and things that we still have to be mindful of. Robert's Rules of Order, all those things. So there's definitely a limit as to how the social media plays a role in some of those more formal settings. Absolutely, we early on in COVID, we actually were able to our council was able to meet in person, only a few months into COVID, but once we put up, all the barriers and social distancing stuff. But engaging with the community, we went old school, telephones and emails and those kinds of things, and that just so happened to work for our community. But as we start to get more in the Facebook Live space, and I don't think we're quite ready for TikTok, but we know that video component is there. We broadcast and live stream all of our stuff as well.
For us, Facebook Live is a go-to as long as we can control the audio and the video. We don't want to be using Facebook Live if people are talking in the audience and you can't hear what they're saying. And so it's really becomes more of a production, I think. The town hall meetings that we hold, yes, we'll use Facebook Live, and then we'll make sure we have somebody in the audience using a microphone so that we can capture the audio and the video. We do most of our groundbreaking ceremonies and ribbon cutting ceremonies and town hall meetings on Facebook Live. But we don't use it for everything because we really think it's important that we capture audio and video, and sometimes that's not possible in an environment where you're at a meeting where people are talking from the audience, and it just doesn't always work. But we do love Facebook Live. I think it's very, very effective, and we use it regularly.
When it comes to public meetings, we've seen some of our clients using their social media sites to, one, let people know a public meeting is coming up, but two, here's what's going to be on the agenda or some big ticket items that, to Andrew's point, if you've been monitoring your community run Facebook groups, this is a hot button issue for them. Hey, this is going to be of interest to you on this coming Monday. So that's one example of leveraging social media as a platform to increase your reach. And then to Wendy and Andrew's point about leveraging Facebook Live, I would encourage people to go check out the city of Lake Forest here in Orange County. For the past few years, they've been taking things a step further with streaming their public meetings on Facebook Live, but also considering every Facebook Live comment that comes in as a public comment, as if you were there in the chamber. I know that's a little bit scary for some people to think about, and yes, there is some awkwardness if people are cursing and you have to read it out loud. You try and do it in as neutral, nice a voice as possible, but that is a next phase to consider, if you will.
Great, thank you for that feedback. Thinking about that, John, your comment sparked another thought, and something that I know we wanted to cover here is, what do you do with the spread of misinformation or comments on your social media posts that maybe violate your social media policy or are, inflammatory or things like that. So how have you handled, or what advice would you have to the local governments on the line to navigate that? How are you putting a damper on the spread of misinformation? What is your policy around comments and navigating all of that? Any big picture thoughts or anything in terms of how you have handled that in your jurisdictions?
I realized I was muted. I'm sorry. We have some standard boilerplate disclaimers about vulgar language or things that it's. Let me back up. It's super important that everyone have some level of policy when it comes to owning and maintaining social media pages, whether it's published or posted on the page itself or somewhere on your website. That's really what's going to be the guiding beacon for how we're able to, the rules and the rules of how we maintain and how we can operate social media in local government. So yeah, in our policy, we do have things, standard disclaimer language, any vulgarities or anything's defaming staff or city council that is, absolutely inappropriate, we'll hide or take down. Obviously run it by your city attorneys and legal counsel so it doesn't, violate any First Amendment laws. But yeah, that's kind of how we handle that. In terms of misinformation, it's kind of a two-headed monster. On one hand, if it's a piece of misinformation that's genuinely out there on a post and something that can be dealt with kind of in a single lane highway that can be easily corrected on the post, I think it's super important. We've found to put the right information on the community page or right there on the post so that everybody sees it. It not only adds trust to the organization and people start to lean in more on what the messages you're saying, but it gets the word out that, hey, we're there and we're here to correct any misinformation. On the other hand, if it's, I mentioned air quality is something we dealt with not only now, but in the past, we had some pretty substantial issues with large metal manufacturings emitting cancerous hexavalent chromium back to 2016. That generated a lot of community interest. You can imagine, the whole conversations that went on about that. If it's an issue that is so broad and so you're getting peppered too heavy, social media might not be the right outlet to do that. It might be a fact check page that you can point people to in social media, but say, hey, go to our website and visit this page to see more information on this or correct information. So it has to be an even balance, and I think it's really important that staff, kind of weave through those.
I would agree with Andrew on that. I don't think everything has to be put out on social media, especially the more complicated issues. I think profanity is where we draw the line. Really, we just ask that people, express their opinions in a polite manner. We will take it down, kind of hold firm on that. We just feel that once you lay the ground rules, people follow them. But in terms of content, if people want to speak out, if we see that the record is kind of going off into an inaccurate zone, we'll come in and gently guide it back. But this is a community forum, and we want it to be the community speaking, and we engage to make sure that it stays on point. But we also encourage our community to discuss the issues in our social media, and not try to pound down our opinions, right? But just to make sure that the information stays accurate. That's our guiding principle.
Yeah, and I would say when it comes to misinformation, specifically on comments on posts on your social media sites that you control, we can't assume someone's motives. They may be doing it intentionally, they may be doing it unintentionally, to Andrew's point, because there is some broader perception in the community and they're just repeating what they've heard and what they understand. You also can't make someone believe the facts, but you can try to stop them from converting others. And if you've laid out the facts once, you shouldn't have to repeatedly do that every single time. There should be something within a policy that you've created that allows you some flexibility to stop bad actors in their place. So None of us are lawyers here. Always consult your legal counsel on what your policy should say. You don't want to be impinging on anyone's First Amendment rights. But something that we haven't touched on just yet, if you have to take the action of removing somebody's comment because it is a violation of your policy, you also want to be able to speak with your IT department, your legal counsel, and figure out how this plays into your records retention policy. So do you have a tool like Archive Social or Page Freezer that's capturing that content and that metadata for you in case there's a Public Records Act request later down the line? Or if you don't have that, do you have to do a screenshot first before you remove something? Just make sure all of your social media managers are on the same page of what they have to do before something goes bye-bye.
Good advice.
Yeah, no, that's oh, sorry, go ahead, Wendy.
Oh, good advice. Yeah, we use Page Freezer, and it's good advice to have that program to help you out.
Just, yeah, acknowledging the fact that none of us on the line are attorneys, and we are doing a second part of this webinar series that will be focused on some of the legal components of this and things to be aware of, that a lot of what John just mentioned in terms of First Amendment, open meeting challenges, record retention issues, due process claims, all of that, and that's next week. So if anybody on the line is interested in learning more on the legal side, definitely join us there. But just wanted to bring that up as something I know a lot of our local governments on the line are dealing with. We also have a number of sample social media policies on our website. So if you are interested in pulling one together and don't have one, I can point you all to that in the follow-up email as well, because I do think it's important to have something to fall back on there. Do want to make sure we get into some of these audience questions as well, but I've loved the discussion so far. So we have some advice type questions. Any kind of rule of thumb or any advice you would give on how frequently to be posting?
I can jump in there. Well, we try to post natively, share others' information as well, so that we're not just yelling into the social media abyss. It's interaction, and I think that's really important. I would try to, around 3 times a day is kind of where we land on Facebook. We don't have any rules for Twitter. Anything you want to do with Twitter is great. And those are our basics. Our Instagram is a bit different. We only provide pretty pictures of Placer County. We use stories to educate our audience. I'm not sure if that's a good plan. I've been on the fence on that, but we have such a large audience of people who love the beautiful pictures that we post that I've just left it be, because I think I would anger everyone if I changed it midstream. They signed up for a different platform and now I want to educate them. So I only use stories, but in general, I would say I would share that.
For us, it really depends. I'd say if, obviously as special events are, around the corner, or if there's critical, public information we need to get out, there's not a hard rule. I would say this though, if we do a lot of time putting together a really nice video, or, we're ready to do it, I try not to water it, our team tries not to water it down by putting videos right after it, or our other content right after it. That's kind of our main focus for that day, or that, couple of days. So that gets a lot of attention, and so we do talk strategically about that.
Yeah, and I'll say from my own just personal research in the social media space, it's not like there is some silver bullet where, say, you post 5 times a day and then all of a sudden your reach and engagement is going to go up. The most generic advice out there is try and do it at least once a day. But I'd also encourage you, if you have the ability to, run an experiment for a couple weeks or a month in terms of increasing your frequency or decreasing your frequency. How does your average reach and engagement change? And then if you feel like you need to start increasing that frequency, just make sure you have the resources in place to be able to stick with it, because the probably worst thing you can do is set that community expectation where they're going to hear from you multiple times a day, and then that has to drop off because you can't keep up.
I would agree with Andrew that when we have a video that we spent a lot of time on, or a podcast, we're going to put that out there and we're going to give it the whole day. And we have to tell people, right? Everyone stay off social media, don't go on and don't schedule, and give it some room to breathe because it's a big one. So yeah, in agreement with that, Andrew.
I want to talk a little bit about reach. So we talked about the demographics of the different social media platforms. We've talked about pairing it with in-person efforts and some lower tech options. But how are you ensuring that you're reaching the breadth of your community? So for example, maybe older residents who might not be on social media, or Andrew, in your case, are you also posting in Spanish to reach the breadth of your population in Paramount? So just any thoughts on how you all are using social media or pairing social media with other types of outreach efforts to make sure that you're reaching your full community?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Melissa, is the bilingual part for us is super important. And sometimes, if it's a heavy text, that's an easy one, we can get it translated. But even like our Facebook Lives, we have a pretty neat little program that we do sometimes, cooking with the mayor or cooking with the council. And we'll have like a little feature where, we're advertising for this program. And yeah, our council members who for the most part are bilingual, they'll just do the whole thing in Spanish. And it seems to work for us, and every community is different, but really empower. The city council is our elected leaders are always going to want to be very involved. So, give them the space to do that, and as long as it's within your policies. For us, we don't allow one council member to have more time than the other. It's just for elected purposes. But there's other avenues to do that. So tap into those strengths.
Go ahead, Wendy. Sorry.
No, please, it's okay.
Okay. As much as we're within this hour and a half focusing on social media, it's always a good reminder that, and I think Wendy touched on this earlier, this is just one tool in your toolbox. Ideally, your website is your flagship for hosting information, for hosting facts, news, events, things like that. You should ideally be pointing back to that. But as far as trying to reach people in a non-digital way, something that we've seen work, especially in communities we've worked with before, where they have older communities or English as a second language communities, leveraging the community partners that you may have hopefully already in your pocket. So that is your local faith groups or your senior center or what have you. You could probably come up with some better ideas of folks who are boots on the ground, working with the audiences that you need to try and reach. You don't have to do it all yourself all the time. There should be outlets that you can work through who are going to help either spread your messaging or vice versa. If there's some conversation happening within their community that you need to be made aware of, they can be your liaison to funnel that up to you.
I would just add that in terms of reach, we are wading into the TikTok pool, and because we easily reach a strong, I think, female base. I think 75% is what our demographic is, which is huge, and so we would like to obviously make it a little bit more balanced. And we have a strong reach into our 65+ community. So trying to reach the younger folks with the information is difficult for us, and it's a challenge. So we have started that TikTok, and it's hard for us. I'm not going to lie, we're still trying to find our way. But right now we use it for recruitment and trying to encourage people to become employees of the county, and that seems to be effective. So I wouldn't say that we have found our way forward yet with trying to find our avenue into the younger age group. I know that we reach a good amount of 40+, but the young folks, we're still struggling with that.
I love that. I haven't heard of TikTok as a recruitment method before, but that's really interesting. Love that you guys are getting success that way. But both to your point and John's point and Andrew's point, it's also what we talk about in terms of community engagement in general is making sure you have a good understanding of who's in your community and who you're trying to reach, and finding the tools or the community organizations or those other ambassadors that are going to help you reach those folks. And social media may not be that tool to reach everybody in your community, but it's definitely, as John said, one tool is a toolbox that can help with outreach and engagement. Would like to go back to, we talked a little bit about political will and buy-in from the top. Any suggestions for folks who are maybe having challenges either getting their city council or board of supervisors or maybe their executive level staff on board with taking their social media from that kind of bulletin board type platform that we talked about at the beginning to more of that engagement type of a platform? Any thoughts on navigating that?
Well, I can share, our experience, what our experience has been, and so we have a very active younger city council, as many communities do, and they're very engaged on social media. And it's, I mean, over the last 5-10 years, it's just you see the interest build and build and build on wanting to have a lot more engagement, and you see the pressure on staff to be more engaged, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming. And I can totally empathize with kind of feeling like not being able to meet the expectations or in that sense on social media. But what we found to be successful is I work very closely with our department heads and the city manager, and we encourage our managers and more of our frontline staff, through through department meetings and stuff, to really empower that creativity. Talk about what are things that they're seeing out in the department level and out in the field, and start sharing those as an administration. Start sharing them with the top, through manager meetings and department head meetings. And I think that the more the executives hear that, and the department heads hear that, and the city council start to get a better feel of what's important to the community, and how the engagement is, social media is being able to be utilized as a much better tool, as John said. People start to embrace that, and it just like anything, social media, any big decision for a city or a county, it takes grooming. It takes a lot of coming around and embracing this stuff. A really successful program isn't just going to happen overnight. And I think as more leaders start to embrace it and come up with plans to incorporate it into the organization's vision, over time that stuff starts to come along. So it takes time, but yeah, that's kind of our experience.
So I would just add to that I think we had a bit of an evolution about 8 years ago, where we went from a very small communication staff to a very large communication staff under the leadership of a new executive director. And so very quickly we came from having just a small impact to a very large presence in the environment, and that was probably pretty disconcerting for the executive and for the electeds. And but if through time they came to recognize what a benefit it was to have that information flow and to be transparent and to share with the community what's going on, not to be afraid of public opinion, but to use it as a resource. Today, we have full trust from our board of supervisors, from our executive team. They give us full rein because we've shown good judgment, and they trust our instincts, and we act wisely. We don't, obviously we do our best to get the truth out there, get the information out there without causing controversy, and that's our mission. It doesn't always happen. Certainly, we can't control everybody out there, but I think that just overall, being willing to be transparent and be creative and use video and use everything that's out there. Use your podcast, and I know that's great to say if you have a team of 8. Not everybody has that, so I get that totally. But it's still to be as creative as possible and transparent as possible. I think is on your side in the end, as long as you stay on the side of truth and not be deceptive. And our electeds have come to understand the value that it's given to them and the insight that it's given to them, because the community communicates back and then starts to participate, right? Because you've engaged them, and now they're guiding us, and not just we're not just a sounding board out there. So anyway, it's been, I think, a super transition for our county and made us much more progressive in a county that wasn't progressive just a decade ago. And so it's been very, very helpful, I think, for us.
Nothing else to add there. You said it perfectly.
Perfect. Let's see if we can get maybe 1 or 2 more questions in here. I know we're running short on time. We have a few folks that have asked about boosting posts. Any guidance on when you should be boosting or what types of posts to be boosting? Because we obviously talked about that as a key strategy and getting more eyes on your content.
Yeah, I'll talk about this from the PR marketing advising side of things. So something to keep in mind, we are currently in election mode right now and supporting a couple different ballot measures. And legal counsel has given us the guidance that they do not want to boost posts for a higher dollar amount than what our average has been for the past several months. So something to keep in mind that boosting posts, that particular practice has to become regular in order for you to, in the really important times, be able to use it as a platform and not run into legal issues. So there's that. I've also been encouraging public agencies to start experimenting with, don't think about it as something you can only do once a month and have to throw hundreds of dollars at. What's the smallest amount that you could spend and get some kind of return on investment? Is it $5, $50? Try doing that more frequently. And again, compare to a past period, see how that gooses your reach and engagement numbers up. And maybe that becomes your strategy. This is something you just do normally for every post, every other post, rather than feeling like you have to save it for something super important.
Criteria that I use are pretty simple. How much time and energy did I put into it? If I put a lot of time and energy into it, if it's a video, let's get it out there, let's boost it. We put significant resources. And then also the messaging. How important is the messaging that we need to get it out there, and we'll boost that. And we have a budget. It's not huge, but about $500 a month is what we dedicate, which is not, not small, but we're trying to reach an entire county. And that's not just boosting on Facebook, but that might be Google ads or things like that, other marketing avenues that, so we do have other avenues that we put that money to. Yeah, boosting posts is important, and especially, and it changed, right? It changed in 2020, and Facebook changed their algorithm, and now if you don't boost, you don't get the same kind of play that you used to get as a government entity, and it's really important to note that things changed, and now we have to pay for it.
And I don't have anything to add. I agree with both Wendy and John.
Right. All right, so I do apologize to those of you whose questions we didn't get to. There's a lot of questions that came in. Definitely a very important topic. Wendy, there was also quite a few questions about some of the pages and things that you mentioned in your strategy. So maybe I can get some links from you to include in our follow-up email so we can get some direct access to folks for those as well. I just want to share a few resources with you all on the line before we jump off. As I just mentioned, we are doing a webinar on the legal parameters around social media next week. So if you're interested, we'll be digging into more of that social media policy, again, the Brown Act, First Amendment challenges, things like that in that webinar. So please join us if you're interested there. We are also hosting a 2-day public engagement training. Social media is a small part of that, but we'll be talking about overall public engagement strategy and implementation. And we still have a few spots open on that training, which is also next week. So if you're interested, definitely get to our website there. And then we just have another host of leadership resources, articles on social media use and how to make the most of that. And again, I also mentioned we have social media policies on our website. So check any of that out if you're interested, or definitely reach out to me. Just a quick plug for our channels in terms of social media, since we've been talking about that. We are on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please join us there if you don't already follow us. And then we also send out a newsletter, and that's the link to sign up for our newsletter if you are interested in that type of communication as well. As I mentioned, we will be sending out the recording as well as the slide deck within the next few days, so stay tuned for that. And then I'm going to go ahead and put our email addresses up here. So again, if we didn't get to your question, or if you're looking for any of those resources I just mentioned, or if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we will get to that as much as possible. With that, since we are a little over 11:30 already, I just want to say a big thank you to all of my panelists this afternoon. Really appreciate you taking your time to share your expertise and your experience in this space with all of our attendees on the line, and want to thank our attendees for joining us this morning to have the conversation about social media and engagement. John, Andrew, Wendy, any final thoughts before we jump off?
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, thank you all. Have a great afternoon, everybody.